Forgiveness. I want to take a few minutes to talk about forgiveness. I was listening to James Altucher's podcast where he interviewed a guy named, who is this guy? Scott Galloway, who has written, so Scott Galloway quit everything in 1999. He quit his job, his marriage, unlike my friends, unlike myself. He was a bigwig at Morgan Stanley. Anyway, he just wrote the book, The Algebra of Happiness, and I thought this was incredibly interesting. He made a video about it, which has 2 million views. And anyway, the issue is there is some fundamental stuff of happiness I want to talk about. The interesting thing is Scott's an atheist, and this I find it ironic because forgiveness is attributed to kind of like the Christian faith, and yet I don't think it needs to be at all. In fact, what Scott says, forgiveness is one of the contexts or constructs of the algebra of happiness. And it's literally the ability to forgive yourself, in particular. And I just found that funny. It's one of those things actually where I think we get so caught up in labeling people. Like he's a Christian, he's a Muslim, he's an atheist, and yet we're all human beings. We're all striving for the same thing, which is to live a happy life. No getting around that. I do find it a little bit interesting because Scott, he teaches at Stern. I think that's NYU, New York University. Just to be an atheist nowadays is almost part and parcel of academia. It's like if you're going to be a Christian, because Christians, I don't know, whatever. All the arrows are directed at Christians. All the other religions, fine, but Christians, and I guess a little bit of the Jewish people too. But we get all the arrows thrown at us. But to be a devout believer in God inherently puts you on the outside looking in academia. And so it's almost like default, if you're going to be an academic, you got to be an atheist because somehow that proves your street cred that you didn't fall under the spell of that spaghetti monster in the sky or whatever they call it. That was just so cliched. It's the exact opposite, actually. The atheists, a lot of these guys, if you listen to them, they try to come across as being brave. They're so brave. They challenge the orthodox of Christianity, which are all hands-made tale. And it's just silly. If you look at someone like Francis Collins, you ever heard of Francis Collins? The head of the Human Genome Project, and a lot of the mainstream type scientists and whatnot want him barred from any academic stuff because of his belief in a Christian God. And I just I chuckle at that because that's being brave. To be brave is to be like a guy like Stephen Meyer, who says, look, I have a faith and I'm going to bring it to the fruition and it's going to hurt my career. Bar none, being a theist is going to hurt your career. Not all theists. There are groups of theists that do okay, as long as they're kind of on the outside looking in to some degree. But if you're going to be a theist, in particular one of the Jesus philosophy for sure, who believes that Jesus rose from the dead to free us to go to heaven, you're not gonna have any success in academia. I mean, it's going to be a brutal task. And not only that, you are brave, and I have nothing but utmost respect for you. To be a Jewish follower, it's going to be hard. Not quite as hard, but I hate to say there's a heavy, rampant anti-Semitism on the rebound here across the world. It's never went away, frankly. It just was hidden. It wasn't in polite society you could be an anti-Semite, and now that's. In fact, I was just reading just today. A guy from CNN, he had posted. He literally is a photo editor at CNN who posted in 2011 on his Twitter or whatever, something that some Jews got killed, and he goes, "Oh, those pig Jews got killed," and from a bomb from the Palestinian liberation folks killed these innocent people. And he wrote on his Twitter page or wherever it is, "So glad to see at least 4 Jewish pigs got killed in a bomb," and yet he was employed by CNN. And there's this guy who I follow who did a history of all the anti-Semitism at CNN, and you're just like, what the hell is this? Nuts. I mean, what kind of hate do you have in your heart to say? And the funny thing is, one of the people who died was actually a Christian studying in Israel. It wasn't in a Jewish pig. Who are these people? Oh, they're Muslims. No, they're not. They're not Muslims. These are evil people. They're atheists. They're Christians. They're Muslims. They're Jews. Lots of evil people out there. But CNN shouldn't be in the business of employing them. I mean, can you imagine? Who was it? The guy who was a food critic. He sang for this band called Youth Defense League back in the day in the 80s. And Youth Defense League was a literally right-wing band, but they weren't like racist. They're just right-wing. Anyway, so 30 years hence, he got fired from his gig as a food critic because they found he was a singer in the Youth Defense League. And I'm sitting there thinking, here's CNN, CNN. And a guy posts something about these innocent Jews getting killed, and he posts like is good. And this is just 2011, and that guy still had a job until literally last night, where he finally resigned. Just the whole thing, the idea that atheism makes you brave is nuts, man. To be brave is to be Christian and Jewish in this day and age. We all know this. I mean, anyone knows that. And at least in academia, I mean, basically modern society, we get this. And the one thing that we can't do as followers of faith is sit there and whine and say, everyone's against us. No. Can't be doing that. I mean, look at Jesus. He didn't do that. And he was certainly held, everyone's against him. We know that for a fact. But then, obviously Jesus was the risen, the only sin-free human being ever to live on this world. So we can look at him and say, we should be more like him. What would Jesus do? But the issue is you're never going to be like Jesus. You can't inherently because you're created and born in sin. So the other would be more like Peter, be more like Paul, and be more like Saint Stephen, all these guys. I mean, the martyrs are legion. The martyrs are legion, but they're all sinners for sure. Those are the brave people. But they didn't say, they're saying, oh, everybody's out to get us. The media's against us. Everyone hates us. No, they went out there and they waved the banner, and they literally were hung for that. So talk about taking arrows. We're talking theoretical arrows, my friends. They took, and they are right now today in Iraq and Syria, all over the world, taking the arrows because of their faith. And look, and I'm not just saying for Christians. I mean, the Jewish people are too. There are some Muslims that take the arrows because their way of looking at the praise of Allah is different than these other people. I mean, we know this to be true. There's all kinds of sects in every single religion, every single space, for sure. I mean, just it happens all the time. But anyway, so I want to go back to, what's his name again? Stephen Galloway. The Algebra of Happiness. He was talking about his parents. I think his parents living off like $40,000 a year, and they got $48,000 a year coming in. They're happy as a clam because they have more income coming in than they can spend, and they're not spending that much because they're older. Where have you heard that before? And what he says is, and I absolutely think this is true, and I think it gets I think there's a little bit too much focus on this because in terms of money can't buy happiness. Well, it does to some degree, for sure. I mean, let's not pretend if you're rich, you're going to be miserable. There's no validity of that. But let's not pretend you can't be happier with a little bit more money. I mean, that's just silly. But, it comes a point where diminishing returns, as I talk about all the time in economics, at some point you have too much, it doesn't increase their level of satisfaction with the more product you get. And so what he was saying is, look, you can't buy happiness with money, but it certainly can make you more comfortable, which can lead to happiness. But the number, the actual dollar amount isn't what makes it happy, is that you don't have to worry so much about your next paycheck. And that's 100% right. So if you're only spending $40,000 a year and you got $4,000 a month coming in from pensions and or Social Security, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. You're just fine. And so then you can enjoy your life, even though you're poor, you're not making any money. You're like, I don't care. I don't need it. That's the whole point. And I just find it funny. So he's saying that is once you have your needs met with your income, essentially your passive income or your guaranteed income, you can be a heck of a lot happier because you don't have to worry about it day to day. But I also found the thing about forgiveness. He was talking about forgiving yourself. And as an atheist, he talks about the need to do that because if you can't do that, you always be punishing yourself. And he goes, and he talked about a study, these people who looked at these senior citizens and say, what was one thing you would tell yourself, 50 years ago? And basically they all said to lighten up. Don't be so hard on yourself, i.e. forgive yourself, because we all make mistakes. And I think that's incredibly important, actually. There's a lot of perfectionism in the United States today that you got to be perfect in all things. And I know a lot of people who are interested in like going on YouTube or something like that. They get worried, what if it's not perfect? Hell, dude, just freaking no one is perfect. Nothing is perfect. I just made a mistake yesterday. I didn't read this guy's question right. I misunderstood it. All right, so what? You freaking move on. I mean, everyone makes mistakes. No big deal. Just freaking move on. But you can't limit yourself because you say it's got to be perfect, or someone might be a troll on me. You just got to move on. You got to say, I don't care. I got something. I got a message. I got to get out there. And it starts with self-forgiveness. And as a Christian, what we say is, does God forgive you? I mean, answer that. Does God forgive you? What do you think? Now, I literally, I want you to answer this to yourself. So nod your head or shake your head if God forgives you. He does. He does. Because he loves you. You are created in his image. Your soul is God's. And he wants nothing but the best for you. He forgives you. So if God, the creator of all things, seen and unseen, can forgive you for your mistakes, which he expects of you. He knows you aren't perfect. Why can't you forgive you? That's tough. That's tough. That was tough for me. He said, man, I wish. You got to do it. Are you better than God to be able to say, God, I appreciate you forgiving Hitler, but you can't forgive me? And God would forgive Hitler. All Hitler has to do, or Stalin or Mao, is get on their knees, acknowledge God, and ask for forgiveness. And God knows of their hearts if they're true. If God can forgive them, and he can inherently forgive you, because you aren't Hitler, Stalin, or Mao, why can't you forgive you? I'm telling you, I've had to deal with this all the time. Of all the mistakes I made in my past, actually it's funny because they all revolve around this one thing, this one substance called alcohol. And Steve talks about that, how alcoholism, they did some Harvard study and they followed 400 men from like 1920 on. And the one thing, when they asked them how their happiness was as they got older, the people partook in alcohol were not happy. The people who didn't were happy. That doesn't mean they're teetotalers. It just means there's always one constant among the unhappy people is alcohol. That doesn't mean you can't be drinking and be happy. It doesn't mean that. In fact, he talks about how he likes to drink. But he says, look, it's the abuse, and alcohol is the easiest thing to be abused. And you just feel crappy. You're not as productive. You know all this. I remember this too. I'll never forgetting. I won a bunch of scholarships when I was at college, and I won a lot of money. And there's one for the Institute for Humane Studies, which was like $20,000. This back in the mid '90s, excuse me. It's like a $20,000 scholarship, all kinds, like a fellowship. I was stoked. You had to write a pretty long essay on an Ayn Rand novel. I forgot. It wasn't Atlas Shrugged. I forgot what it was. I always forget that. It was the Fountainhead. It wasn't that. It might have been the Fountainhead. Anyway. And it was incredibly interesting. And I remember, okay, I had it down, I had my outline down. It was going to be a good thing. And then I just went off the rails with drinking with the fellas and just said, I'll do it tomorrow. And then, the night I was said, okay, you just got to knock it down. I just, we had like 3 days yet to do it. I said, okay, just take the next 3 days, get this done, at least submit it. It might not be perfect, but at least be something. And I never submitted it because I was just too busy drinking. And I said, it wasn't like I'm waking up, under the bridge drinking freaking tequila. It wasn't like that. It was just I was going to bed late at night, waking up hungover, have to go to work. Going to bed late at night, waking up hungover, have to go to work, and I just didn't have any time or energy, and I just felt like crap. So I never did the essay, and I think I could have won. I would have. I mean, who knows? I mean, look, I don't have any. I like where I am in my lot in life. I don't have any regrets, but that was the one thing I say, man. Who knows? I know. I think we don't know. It's fine. You can't go back and start pounding yourself. But again, and I've talked about before some of the fights I got into and things like that, and some stupidity things I did because of alcohol. It's bad. But at the end of the day, I don't regret. I mean, I regret it. I wish I did not have done these things, but I don't kill myself for it because you just got to move on. I'm happy with my lot in life, but a lot of people can't. A lot of people, they just, they sit there and say, "Oh, I'll never be able to be true in God's eyes or whatever." But God always allows you. He always forgives. All you got to do is ask. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Stephen Galway said, you got to forgive yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. And there's studies from retirees that say the one thing I tell myself in my 25 or 30 years in the past would be just lighten up. Don't be so hard on yourself. I would say for me is don't worry so much. That would be my big thing. You look back in hindsight, you're like, you just don't worry so much. Things are going to work out or they won't, but you just can't worry so much. And unfortunately, it's easier to say in hindsight than it'd be easier to say, don't worry so much when I was in my 25s. Now, when I'm in my 70s, I'll tell myself right now, I was 49, don't worry so much. And I still worry. Can't help it. It's natural. But I would tell myself, just don't sweat it so much. Lastly, he talks about the arc of happiness. You're happy as a kid, you're happy, and then you hit 25 to about 45, and you're at your least happiness, and then you start getting up there and you're getting more and more happy. And that's exactly where I am. So I love being a kid, man. I mean, I hated, being poor, but I love just being able to run around carelessly. I love that. I love living on my little island with my friends. It was freaking, waking up early in the morning, my Doggy going down the beach and just sitting there and contemplating. I love that. And then you get, you start having kids on responsibility. You're down here, you're stressed out all the time. Like, what if I get fired? What if I don't have any money? Blah, blah, what if? I would attribute it to a debt, actually. He didn't say that, but I would attribute it to debt. He attributes it to age. I think when you're 25 to 45 and 50 is when your biggest amounts of debt you'd have, and you're starting like, oh man, how am I going to pay this stuff? I bet if we did a correlation between no debt and debt, the age, the arc of happiness would go away from age and go from debt. No debt down here, high debt here. It's almost like a seesaw. Yeah, it would be a seesaw. No debt, no. No debt down here, high happiness. Debt, low happiness. It'd be like a seesaw. I guarantee. I can't guarantee anything. I imagine if we did an arc of happiness when it comes to debt, it wouldn't be an arc. It'd be a curve, an economics curve, going up. That cross. Was it perpendicular or something like that? I can almost assure you that. But anyway, it's interesting. So forgiveness, man. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. And then, of course, forgive others. But you got to start with number one. God forgives you. If he can forgive you, why can't you? And I say this to myself for catharsis. It's a cathartic thing for me to go on here and just yap, because it helps me too. It helps me be able to express what's in my mind, and I'm sharing it with you just because it helps me to verbalize what I feel. And as I say this to myself more, I'm saying to you, forgive yourself, Josh. God forgives you. And when I can express it to you, I'm expressing internally, which makes me a better person for it. So I appreciate you being there. Smash. We'll see you next time.